What have you found in the publishing world when you've had your 20 or 30 or 40-page article and you've sent it off to a journal? Did you perceive in any way, shape, or form any difficulties because of the subject matter?
There really isn't the kind of interest, I think, in reading about Italian Americans in a larger public that one would expect for a group that is now very well educated. I mean, you look at all the basic educational data, Italian Americans are the same as whites in terms of college attendance, college graduation. They're overrepresented in various professions like the law and medicine. So we're now talking about a group that really has made it educationally. But I don't see that large audience out there beyond the academy that's hungering to read about this experience. Now, when we talk about film, obviously, it's a different story. There seems to be, that's a very successful genre of filmmaking. Scorsese's film, Raging Bull, very powerful film, very evocative of a particular time and place. But in the book form, I think the results are pretty minimal.
There's a sort of conservative component of the Italian American community that would say that cinema has not been our friend.
There is an ambivalence, I think, about it. Scorsese's film I found really kind of deep, but many people watching it could take away a superficial message that was in fact pretty negative.
I don't know if you saw the YouTube film of Tancredo, I think about 6 or 8 months ago, talking against any immigration bill that would be favorable to the undocumented, and comparing and actually contrasting current immigration with the immigration of his parents and grandparents.
This shows why the history needs to be known. Because those kinds of comparisons are fraught generally with ignorance about the conditions under which Italians, in fact, came to the United States. I mean, it's absolutely true. There was very little illegal Italian immigration to the U.S., but basically because we didn't have full immigration laws with any teeth until the 1920s. So that if Tancredo had a deeper knowledge about the kinds of people who were coming among the Italian-American immigration, he might actually see the resemblances between it and the contemporary immigration from Mexico and Central America, the immigration that yields most of the undocumented.
I'll say right now to our audience that they can go to the Calandra website under demographic studies and get a history of the classification of Italian Americans as a protected class within CUNY. You were one of 3 members of an expert panel that looked at the underutilization analysis that had been done.
CUNY is pretty specific, and there are Italian Americans in many parts of the academic world now, but where you don't see them is at the elite level. And CUNY, I think the processes at work at CUNY are not the processes at work at places like Harvard or Stanford or Michigan. But I do think that there is a resemblance in this sense, that there was in some way a lack of welcoming of the possibility of Italian American faculty at CUNY. You noted at the very beginning that I was a CUNY faculty member, so I knew something.
And you were here in '74.
I was here in the mid-'70s. And I have to say that as a member of the expert panel, we looked at the best data that the City University could collect about Italian American faculty. And I found it rather disappointing that in a city and a region that is probably the greatest concentration of Italian Americans in the United States, maybe in the Americas, that the representation, even given a policy of affirmative action for Italian Americans, had hardly changed over 20 years. And that there was so little representation, it seemed, of Italian Americans at the most elite level in the system, namely the level of distinguished professor. And so the committee, I think, rightly focused on these data as not demonstrating, an effective policy of affirmatively seeking out and recruiting Italian-American faculty.
The Calandra Institute, myself and Dr. Vincenzo Milione, a year ago, October, had our first meeting where CUNY committed to implementing as best possible all of the recommendations of the expert panel. And we've had a couple of meetings since then, and most recently there has been some action. So we'll see. It's hopeful.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that.
And I think maybe in the next 6 months or a year we need to visit that with especially you three.
Okay, well, so I would look forward to being involved in that effort
good,
again.
Good. This has been an interesting conversation. We look forward to you coming back for other visits, and we'll monitor Italian Americans nationwide.
Right. Thank you very much for this conversation. Okay. Thanks.
We now join the 125th anniversary celebration of the birth of Fiorello LaGuardia, the Little Flower.
Fiorello LaGuardia has imprinted his name on the face of New York, like no other political leader in the city's history. LaGuardia, the Little Flower, the renowned mayor of New York City from 1934 to 1945, is finally remembered as the mayor who read the funny pages of the city over the radio during a newspaper strike, or as the mayor who loved to don his red fireman's helmet and chase fires. Mayor LaGuardia did little to refute these stereotypes. In fact, he deliberately cultivated them. However endearing to the public these images made LaGuardia appear, they hid the deeper reality of a man who should be remembered as the most important mayor in the history of the United States.
But let me make myself clear. Not my understanding that this contest is for the purpose of putting out one set of politicians in order to put another set of politicians in.
Mayor LaGuardia's accomplishments include the political defeat and eventual dismantling of the Tammany Hall Democratic political machine in New York City. This corrupt political institution shaped New York politics and politicians for almost a century.
I campaign on a platform that I give this city a non-political, non-partisan administration.
Yes, but that was campaign talk.
Like hell it was, I meant it.
LaGuardia also drastically changed the face and the infrastructure of New York. He created much of the modern city that we now inhabit.
See, it's the last thing I do in this city. I want to get rid of all these old log tenement houses. There's a fire trap for human beings.
Slums and tenements were raised, making way for more modern housing projects for the working class and average New Yorker. Public parks and recreational spaces flourished. Miles of new parkways and highways were constructed, along with hospitals and schools, shipping docks and areas for commerce, keeping New York City competitive for business and industry well into the future. Mayor LaGuardia helped to improve living conditions for all of the residents of New York by improving city services like the police department, the fire department, the health department, the prison system, the city's sanitation and sewage departments. Fiorello LaGuardia helped to financially restructure New York City and bring its operating budget out of spiraling debt. His early experience as a United States congressman helped LaGuardia lobby and persuade Washington to reinvest federal tax dollars back into New York City. LaGuardia's bold attempts to contain and defeat the growing strength of organized crime was represented in his appointment of Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey.